Welcome into Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast presented by BetMGM. Yep, DeBundo's back. He's got the jersey on. He's got to make sure he shows it for the YouTube audience. We are on YouTube. We have our audio edition, of course, wherever you get your podcast. Brendan Glasheen, Sean Zerillo, and the aforementioned Anthony DeBundo. It is our opening day preview. You can hear best bets every Monday, Tuesday, and Friday mornings during the regular season. So subscribe to Payoff Pitch wherever you listen to your podcast. And again, find us on the Action Network YouTube page. Please subscribe there as well. 5-star ratings and reviews, whatever you want to say, negative, positive. If it's 5 stars, we love it. You're consuming the content. We greatly appreciate it. So we got a 15-game slate coming your way Thursday. We're doing this a day early. When we do these episodes in the coming weeks for the coming months, we will be here in the morning, day of game. So should mention that ahead of time, that stuff happens, right? Lineup changes, pitching changes, openers, all that good stuff. Rainouts, God forbid. But that stuff happens, right? So we're here the day before to just kind of get ourselves back into this, the swing of things here. And we're going to start off quickly with some overall thoughts and storylines for this year's opening day. We're not going to talk about Shohei Ohtani, okay? We're going to talk about baseball, the actual baseball. I think, Zerillo, what are some things you're looking at this first month or so that you're going to be watching keenly?
Well, the ball was flying in spring training. We've seen Major League Baseball change the baseballs every season, and then we have to cut into the baseballs 2 months into the season and see which baseballs they were actually using relative to past years. But I think the thing that stood out most to me was the fact that 3 different players had 3 home run games in spring training. And the last time that happened was in 2018 when the balls were juiced. So a bit of concern on my end that they may have reintroduced new baseballs this season. Need to see how the ball is flying. Need to see how many home runs we're getting per day, especially earlier in the season when the weather is pretty crappy throughout a large part of the country. We'll talk about wind and weather throughout a bunch of these matchups, but curious to see how the ball is flying. Home runs were actually up last season, 12.5%, and run scoring was up about 8%. But the most dramatic thing you probably noticed was the increase in stolen base attempts, which rose by about 40% relative to previous years. We've talked a lot about in our season preview pods, considering the success rates that steals may go up even more this season. And when you factor in the fact that pitchers now have an 18-second pitch clock as opposed to a 20-second pitch clock with runners on base, and you also have this new obstruction rule with regards to tag plays and the fact that fielders are not allowed to block any part of the base anymore with their foot. You have to provide a completely clear path to the runner. We're going to see more steals that would have normally been outs, but the guy is given the base by the umpire because of the rule, or just runners being able to get timing earlier, get a larger lead with that 18-second pitch clock, less time for the pitcher to focus on them. So I think steals are going to go up this year. I think that 18-second pitch clock rule with runners on base is going to prove a difference on top of just teams running more aggressively because they had so much success last year. And then finally, we'll talk about it in the handicaps, but the Dodgers and the Padres, even the Yankees too, going internationally and then coming back to play these opening day games, the body clock, the sleep schedule. I mean, the Dodgers and Padres were playing what would be for them on the West Coast like a 3:30 a.m. body clock game. And now they're coming back and playing an afternoon game and an evening game, respectively. All that travel to factor in. Just a bit of an odd circumstance. Even the Yankees, too, taking a large traveling party, to Mexico City. You can't guarantee me that everybody made it back onto that team plane and nobody had a stomach issue, and maybe that didn't get passed around too. So, and I'm being 100% serious about that. So, if you take away 1%, 0.5%, right, for travel issues, for health, to either of these teams, to any of these teams, it does influence, where you might want to place your bet on the game. So, travel, leading the spring training. If I was running a team before opening day, I would say absolutely not. Am I sending the team internationally before they go play their opening day game? It's just unnecessary travel and is only going to decrease your chances. So, very excited for the season. We have way too much time before opening day to kind of analyze everything and get these bets in. I like my window to be shorter. I like to have my decisions forced to be made a little bit quicker. I don't like to sit here and think about these lines for 3 days and, end up placing bets that I normally wouldn't. But very excited for the season and just expect, potentially home runs and steals to go up. Maybe we get a 50-50 season this year from Acuna.
Dodgers open at home against the Cardinals, and the Padres are home against the Giants on Thursday. That's how they kick off the season. There's a great write-up right now at Action Network, 30 bets for 30 teams. The entire staff contributes to a full breakdown of the entire league and how you can go about opening day. And those can be more so best bets from a future standpoint. Should be very clear, not just opening day, but things to keep in mind. How about you, DeBundo? What's something that's keeping you up at night this first month of the season that you're going to be watching closely?
Well, besides the NCAA tournament, I think it's interesting the juice
Baseball
balls. So a Twitter account called Goldschmidt Happened. It's a Diamondbacks Twitter account. At Goldie Happens tweeted, I can't remember the last time someone hit a game homer into Fridays, which I guess is like a bar or restaurant at Chase Field, something deep into the outfield. And it's happened in back-to-back games with Seawalk and Blaze. I'm putting the MLB on Juice Ball Watch. So, it's noticeable there too. And Arizona's a park that they use the humidors to control the environment as well, usually like domed. So the fact that the balls are flying even further there, then, fans who are diehards are recognizing like, wait a minute, that ball doesn't usually get that far. Like what's happening with the baseballs? We'll know pretty quickly, right? We said this 2 years ago, the famous under month of April, where every game ended 3-2 for about a month until the books started adjusting and we saw totals at 6 pretty regularly by the end of the month. And then last year, within a week, you could just look at the StatCast ball and drag numbers that you can find on Baseball Savant and say, oh, this ball is different than last year, or they're using a different mix of balls. So we'll know pretty quickly. I'm interested most in park factors. This is year 2 in Toronto of the new dimensions. So the park has played dramatically differently. 3 of the last years they played full seasons. So in 2019, it was league average. 2020, of course, they didn't play there. 2021, they only played a little bit of the season there. 2022, 5th most friendly hitter park in baseball. And then last year, they changed dimensions. People were unsure how it would play. Toronto had a really bad offensive season, especially at home. 25th park factors last year at Rogers Center. So interested to see how that park plays, if it's different this year. And then Petco, they changed the batter's eye. It had been a complaint by visiting and home, the Padres for the last couple years. Team officials, this from The Athletic, team officials acknowledged at least one factor that recently encouraged them to return the batter's eye to its former condition. The lower the arm slot of the pitcher on the mound, the harder it would be to get a read on the baseball. So, they were picking up spinach. They weren't able to pick up spin. The batter's eye was not a uniform color. Now it is. And even Padre players were saying, like, when they went on the road to Arizona, where it's a more dark batter's eye, more uniform, they were able to pick up the ball a lot better. And it matched in the numbers. I mean, the Padres at home last year had terrible OPS numbers. They couldn't get hits, runner in scoring position. They ran really bad. Of course, that didn't help with one-run games and whatnot. But yeah, certainly interested to see how the Padres look with their new batter's eye, if the park plays differently there. I think it might down in San Diego. So those are 2 of the really interesting things that I think are most interesting to watch. And of course, April is the worst weather month of all. So tracking wind and weather matters the most this month, because you can get wildly different games between Chicago, Philly, LA, and St. Louis, for example. So especially in April, where the weather's a little bit more divergent from normal. So excited as Sean is. Way too much time to look into these games. I'm going on the prop episode tomorrow morning with, I think, Jim Turvey. So we're going to get into some props, and that'll be fun. But yeah, I don't like having this much time, because I end up with way too many bets on my daily card for the opening day. And it's a fun sweat, but it's not sustainable for 162 for sure.
Do you know the name of the restaurant that replaced Fridays in Arizona?
I do not.
Scottsdale's Cold Beers and Cheeseburgers, which opened last March.
So it's no longer Fridays. The fan was just
Fridays. It closed, allegedly. I'm reading an article here from ABC Arizona. It closed in 2021.
So snakes are alive. Friday's dead.
Yeah. So you're gonna have to make someone has to make a new Twitter account to adhere to those changes.
To correct Goldie.
Yeah. Not to mention that
happens.
Goldschmidt doesn't even play for the Diamondbacks anymore. But that's
right. But he's a legend.
Yeah. And I'm glad Zarillo brought up the runner lane thing, because now I'm going to be watching. It's like we learned in Little League. You got to stagger the bag when you're going to go make the tag.
I still don't get the rule.
It's going to lead to some insanely, and I mean insanely, frustrating bad beats this season. So very excited for the tweets that we'll get to make when those happen. And I'm sure, because it never does, it won't even out in our favor.
I'm excited to go to a baseball game, and then the first time it gets called, and then just the collective confusion that you'll hear, like the hush of the crowd. It's like, what did they call? It's like when the first couple pitch clock violations, people, that near me in the seats were like, how did he just get walked? How was he out? It was only 2 strikes. And I'm like, well, pitch clock. So I still don't really get it. I'm going to need somebody to, maybe John Boyle do an explainer, and I'll be able to better understand the rule of how like this is actually enforced. What's technically illegal and what's not. Are we going to be reviewing these plays? Like I'm very concerned. If your goal is pace of play, like if we're going to have to review if a guy was impacting the runner lane or not, it's probably a little insane.
Yeah,
John,
and you're
John
concerned
making excuses for Trevor Bauer, so he's busy.
You're concerned, DeBundo, because like you said, you want to be able to tell people at the ballpark, because that's what DeBundo does when he goes to Phillies games. He shares news with people and he gives them a heads up about weather, wind, and now this runner lane rule. Because you're just a man of the people when you go.
That's
to these
all
games.
I'm here for.
He's like the guy calling out for popcorn, but it's just the live odds. He's just shouting the live odds. The
Braves minus 140 live. Strider about to come out of the not face the lineup a third time.
Strider over under 6, over under 6.5, over under 7.
Look forward to that if you're at Citizens Bank Park this summer. DeBundo.
Section 137, row 17. Come hang.
There you go. Perfect. Section, row, all of it. Okay, let's dive into the nitty gritty. This will be basically our rundown, if you will, for the entire year when we're here Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays. We'll start with best bets. Sean Zerillo, what we know now, and I'm glad you both mentioned this. Like you don't like the time, the waiting, but you do. With that said, you both do have bets in for Thursday. So Zerillo, which one is your favorite right now?
Yeah, let's go with the first game of the day. The Mets and the Brewers under 7.5, and good under weather here. This game may not happen. The Phillies and Braves game may also not happen due to rain, and that is part of my handicap, is the bad weather in these parks. Citi Field should play about 5% below what it normally does. It's normally about 10% below league average. Should play about 15% below league average if they do play the game on Thursday. 50 degrees, drizzling, winds blowing in from left field. So 3 factors all contributing to poor weather. The Mets were really bad defensively last season, 25th in defensive run saved. They've been a bad defensive team for a few years, but once Edwin Diaz got hurt in the World Baseball Classic, their bullpen fell apart too, and they finished as a bottom 5 bullpen as well, per expected FIP. The Brewers are a phenomenal defensive team and should be again this season. They were second defensive run saved last year, should continue to have a top 10 bullpen, even without Devin Williams for 3 months. And Freddie Peralta was one of the best starters in all of baseball last season, especially in the second half. 254 expected FIP in the second half of 2024. One of the best starters in the National League. So the Mets have upgraded their bullpen. Diaz back. Got Jake Diekman. I expect Pablo Lopez to give them a bounce back. Their new GM, David Stern's, really good at building rosters that don't have holes, at making sure there are average players at worst in every position. And then once a guy gets hurt, you replace him with another average player. So a lot deeper of a Mets team this season. Obviously, Diaz kind of forces everybody to slot into their correct role, but projected this total at 7. I think the Mets are going to be a lot better defensive team this year. Harrison Bader playing center field for them gives them finally what they've been searching for years, which is a legitimate defensive center fielder. And that pushes Nimmo back into a corner. They should catch a lot more balls in the outfield this season, limit the hits. So just think both teams set up to be more defensive or have better defenses and bullpens, or at least comparable for the Brewers case than they had last year. But also just the wind and the weather pushes this total for me closer to 7. So under 7.5, minus 110 or better. Get things started off with the first game of the day. Hopefully it actually plays and they don't push this one on Friday.
The biggest endorsement I can give to the Brewers bullpen is that after Williams got hurt, our fantasy league that we do for Action, 12-team league, head-to-head categories, I think 4 Brewers relievers were drafted. So people were loading up on the Brewers relievers, and between Uribe and Payamps and I think even Hobie Milner almost went. So people are really interested in this bullpen, and even without Williams,
they have a lot of guys.
Well.
Our previews are good to reference on Freddie Peralta in the NL Central preview discussion at length about his Cy Young capability this year as well. Something you want to check out. DeBundo, best bet for Thursday, opening day. What do you got?
I got pinged on Monday that one book had released odds, and I just, without even kind of looking at any numbers, just went through and said, all right, what do I think looks off? Rays were minus 130 at home against the Jays, and the Dodgers were minus 190 at home against the Cardinals. Now, the Dodgers line has moved, so I'm going to stick with the one that the market seems to not be budging on, and I'm fine with that because the market last year did the same thing with Tampa early in the season, where we got really cheap prices on them in the beginning. I think they started 161-0 before finally losing a game last year. But it's the same thing. It's Zach Eflin, who, the bat projects for a 3.56 ERA at home. He's had 4 straight years with an xERA below 4. We saw his actual numbers take a step forward last year. His pitching plus 106, all better than Jose Barrios, who had a 4.43 ERA projection this year from the bat coming into the season. Last 5 years, he's had an xERA above 4. So strikeout minus walk rate, Barrios 17%, Eflin 23%. Way better starting pitcher by almost a full run, I think, Eflin over Barrios. And no Romano for Toronto in their bullpen is a loss. And offensively, I mean, how different are these two teams? Because if you just name the players on the sheet, you would say, oh yeah, Toronto's got a much better offense. But again, we talked about the Jays last year. They were 7% better than league average as an offense. They were only 9% better on the road. Tampa had better offensive metrics than them as well. So, where's the advantage for Toronto for Tampa to only be minus 130 at home? I'm going to take the Rays. I'm going to trust the Rays. I'm going to be betting them a lot in the first few weeks of the season again. Trust my boy Eflin.
The Jays also without Eric Swanson, who's probably their other best reliever.
Yeah.
Tampa a little banged up. No Josh Lowe, no Aranda. Taylor Wall's out too. They have an entire rotation on the IL as well. That doesn't impact an individual game. But Tampa, a team I think is going to get better as the season goes on too. So, we like the Rays now. I like the Rays win total over. But by the end of the season, if you bring back Boz and maybe Drew Rasmussen, Jeffrey Springs, you add Caminero to this roster, this team gets better as the season goes along. So the Rays are dangerous. Keep an eye on them this year. Started out 13-0 last year. Maybe not quite as hot of a start this year, but they should have a fairly reasonable early schedule. The teams I liked, from a win total perspective, the Rays and the Nationals, the Rays seem to have a favorable early schedule and the Nationals seem to have a fairly difficult early one. So
they're getting Toronto here
on those win totals.
We're getting Toronto here, right? Who doesn't really have a fully formed rotation right now, who has Gausman on a pitch count and who doesn't have their 2 best relievers. So, it's a good time to catch Toronto. And yeah, Tampa doesn't have some guys like you mentioned, but I mean, is Aranda a needle mover? Because it feels like they have like 10 guys who are like kind of that level. Lowe is the one guy I think, probably hurts, but the Rays have shown their strength in numbers over and over again. And, the main core of their top hitters are good to go. So, I'm encouraged. Love Eflin. Think they're undervalued.
Rays open with 7 straight at home. They get the Rangers next after 4 with the Blue Jays. They also get 3 at Colorado. They play the Angels 7 times in April.
Yep.
And they go to Chicago to play the White Sox at the end.
And getting the Rangers to in the first half before their rotation's fully formed. It's just good timing for them to face a bunch of these teams. So
I think it was the Twins that had an easy schedule as well in April, and I know Philly does. So maybe some teams to look into early. I mean, obviously the schedule is the schedule, whatever.
Yeah, but I know. So here we are doing an opening day preview.
A team that you bet them to make the playoffs now, and then you could always buy off later. Presumably as they enter their harder part of the schedule. So
yeah, Minnesota gets Chicago 7 times, the Angels 3, Detroit 7, Cleveland, Milwaukee, and Kansas City. And they also play the Dodgers. So
a reason to invest in Minnesota's divisional price now, right? And then you could take another team, take Detroit after April, something like that. So,
speaking of the Tigers, the people I've been seeing Tigers to win the AL Central everywhere. Yep. Like this is like America's darling this year. It seems the Detroit Tigers to come out of the American League Central. They have a division matchup with the White Sox to open up their season. It's our Fade the Public segment. 85% of the bets, 92% of the cash on the Tigers over the White Sox on opening day. Sean Zerillo, I've been looking forward to this. Are you fading the public? That's another one I've missed.
I can, but I don't really want to step in front of Scooble. And I don't really know how deep Crochet goes into this game. This White Sox bullpen is going to be terrible this year. This is the team who has the potential to be the same pitching staff that the A's were last year. Like this pitching staff is woeful. And I really don't want to bet on the White Sox unless I see not only an edge, but actually like the spot. I projected this line at plus 137. I think projections don't really know what to do with Scooble because Scooble faced very weak competition last year, but put up excellent numbers. But this is the weak competition that he faced. So can project Scooble as good as I think he should be. And he had an expected FIP and expected ERA in like below 2.5 last year. So he was as good as anyone. Crochet didn't really go more than 3 or 4 innings in spring. So he doesn't get through 5 innings probably. the value's there technically on the White Sox. I'm probably passing. Just like I said, I don't want to step in front of Scuba, and I really don't want any part of this White Sox bullpen. The only thing I consider playing is the over 7.5. I made this closer to 8. Over 7.5 minus 105, something like that. I might consider jumping in. It's just going to be another game, though, with bad weather. And Crochet, when he's in, I actually think he'll be relatively effective. I more want to bet against that White Sox bullpen. So maybe a Tigers team total over, maybe a live over once Crochet comes out in the 3rd or 4th inning, as you're also getting Scooble closer to the end of his run. White Sox and over, technically the value sides of this matchup, but probably betting an over or a Tigers team total over, if anything.
DeBundo, how about yourself? Are you fading the people and eyeing the White Sox possibly opening day?
No, I am not. But I do have a prop I like. Before I get into that, I want to talk about Scooble too, because I noticed this a few weeks ago because we talked about him on the AL Central preview. I don't think I said this on the AL Central preview. I want to list the opponents that Scooble pitched against last season, because I know Zarilla just mentioned it. Ready? Oakland, Toronto, Kansas City, San Francisco, Miami, Tampa Bay, Boston, Cleveland, Chicago, the Yankees. Then he finished with the White Sox, the Angels, the Royals, and the A's. That is like the easiest run of schedule you'll ever see an MLB pitcher face. I mean, that's like, incredible. Best offense is probably Boston. They hit him for 4. Chicago hit him for 4. And the Yankees, they hit him for 2 and 3 in 6 innings. So every other start, he was throwing shutouts, but just about.
Scooble's strength of schedule, not great.
Yeah, well, I think it's worth noting, though, because I think the market's going to love him. It's very obvious based on this price and based on anybody who's been on Twitter in the last month that, Scooble's going to get a lot of love. He's 10-1 for Cy, even though he pitched, 80 innings last year. So, is there a time where if he shoves, look at maybe who his next couple starts are and say, hey, this guy that we really like and obviously has stuff and is very impressive, is he going to be overvalued, off of the fact that he got to face semi-major league teams? His second start will be in New York against the Mets. Then he'll get Pittsburgh and then Texas. So, it's going to get a little tougher than Tampa Bay. So he'll face some real teams in April, and we'll get to see how he holds up against the tougher lineups. But, certainly the stuff is there. So I'm not necessarily looking to fade him directly, but I'm going to fade Garrett Crochet's strikeout totals entirely based on usage. He threw 3.2 innings pitched in his last spring training outing. That was the longest logged outing in a competitive game since college in 2019. And the leash cannot be reasonably long in this game. He threw a ton of pitches in the game against the Royals. He got to about 65, 70. That was it. And I don't think it's going to go any higher than that. There's no incentive for the White Sox to push him, risk any injury. I was talking to Sean Kerner about this yesterday, actually, because we were kind of diving into the numbers on this. As long as he doesn't get to face Jake Rogers twice, who I expect to hit 18th, 9th in the lineup, 18th second time. Under 4.5 at minus 105 is good with me. I'd play it up to minus 115. If you follow me in the app, which is why it's worth following us. We did log a better number yesterday, but I'm still good with it now. And I'm going to be on the props episode tomorrow. Like I said, we'll get into some hitting props. There's a couple games I want to look more into today and try to find some angles on hits props and whatnot. So I'm going with Garrett Crochet, under 4.5 strikeouts, minus 105.
Tigers team total for tomorrow, 4.5 runs, by the way.
It's probably about right. I really think that live over, once Crochet's coming out, or, as he's getting through the lineup a second time, turns over the lineup once, probably okay. Gets to the lineup a second time, that's when his effectiveness should fall off. And then that White Sox bullpen should be, a haven for the overs. So, live over or Crochet second time through the order over probably.
Payoff Pitch is presented by North Carolina's newest sportsbook, BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet $5 for new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Underdog for Thursday. 15 games. So of the 15 dogs, who emerges with value? Sean Zerillo.
Your Boston Red Sox, Brendan. I know you probably don't love it. I don't necessarily love it either, but I actually think these teams are much more comparable on paper, especially right now, than you would expect.
Okay, right now, that's okay. You can say that.
Particularly because the Mariners bullpen injuries. Matt Brash, Gregory Santos, both out for now. Jackson Kowar out for the season, Tommy John surgery. And Boston's bullpen is the biggest question mark about this team. It's a lot of sketchy names. Don't know what you're going to get out of it. Hasn't been great in years past. They do have a new pitching coach there, and they had great results in spring training.
Second best ERA under Andrew Bailey.
Yeah, and Andrew Bailey comes with, a pretty good reputation. So I think there's a chance that the Red Sox fix their biggest issue this season, which is pitching. And I like their rotation quite a bit. I like Bayo. There's other guys I like in the rotation more than Bayo, but I'm pretty comfortable with Bayo. And I think most of their guys are underrated, like Cutter Crawford a lot. I think Pivetta is like a sleeper Cy Young candidate. And I think Hoke and Whitlock are actually going to improve this season. So I don't mind Boston starting pitching. I don't mind their lineup. It's the bullpen that sketches me out. But the Mariners bullpen right now is a little bit sketchy to me too. I made the Red Sox about plus 125 in this game. I made the total 7.8. So Boston and the over, underdog and the over are the ways I bet it. Plus 140 or better on the Red Sox, minus 105 or better on the over 7.5. The pitching matchup, Castillo is a guy who, and the Mariners rotation is weird because it's so deep, but I actually don't even know if Castillo is their best starter. It's getting the ball on opening day, but I think I prefer Kirby. I think I prefer Logan Gilbert. And Castillo tends to have like some wonky command issues too when he's not fully into the season as well. We've seen him struggle in April before. So once this game gets into the ball, and both starters not fully stretched out either. So you give them each 5 innings, you get into these sketchy bullpens. And I think the 6th and the 7th inning, the bridge to the back end relievers is where those runs come. So like the over in this matchup, do not bet many overs at T-Mobile Park. This is also a weird time of year where in the Pacific Northwest, and our producer David can tell us, but the weather doesn't really change as much as it does in other areas of the country. And in fact, in months when it could be colder, it's actually warmer, like in San Francisco and Seattle, than it is in other places. So kind of bizarre from a weather standpoint. We'll see roof open or close. But yeah, I do like the bullpens and the sketchiness of the bridge in both bullpens to push this game over 7.5.
There is rain in the forecast tomorrow in Seattle. So
shocking.
Always.
Yeah, that's fair. It's pouring there right now as we speak. It's funny, and I don't know if DeBundo was laughing behind the scenes because I thought it was literally the three of us in an Uber last summer at the Action Network Summit, and you both were telling me how high you are on the Red Sox top of the rotation arms like Cutter Crawford and Brian Bayo and Nick Pivetta and Whitlock.
Pivetta and Crawford had excellent second halves. I wrote a column,
an article, and I didn't really get it, and I listened.
I wrote a column, my annual column, 10 pitchers I'm looking to bet on. 2 Red Sox pitchers made the list, not Brian Bayo, but 2 Red Sox pitchers did make the list. So you can read that, and then the one to fade will be up later on Wednesday as well.
All right, well, it's a consensus underdog because you like the Red Sox tomorrow too.
I do. Sean hinted at it. Luis Castillo. Let's pull up the numbers. So in his career, he has a 3.54 ERA and a 3.2 strikeout to walk ratio. Pretty good. Excellent pitcher. Love Luis Castillo. But in the early months, his numbers are dramatically worse. And that's interesting because you would think, especially since he pitched in Cincinnati for so long, it would be the opposite, where when the weather's really bad, he would start better. And then as the weather heats up and Cincinnati becomes Coors, basically, in the summer, the balls would be flying out of there. ERA would go up. 4.16 career ERA from March to May with a 2.87 strikeout to walk. And then his numbers, his strikeouts go up, his walks go down, his ERA goes down in the warmer months. That's very unusual. He's had some velo stuff that's happened early in his seasons that have derailed him. Last year was one of the few years he didn't have that problem, which I think is interesting because it was his first year in Seattle. So maybe the trend was a Cincinnati thing, but it doesn't make a lot of sense, like I said, given what we know about the weather. So Castillo being a fade early in the season, notorious slow starter. I agree. I like the Red Sox. I think he's overvalued as a result. And, the favorites tend to do well on opening day because they have their A bullpens, but the Mariners don't really. And their strength is their depth, and they don't really get to use that as much on the first day compared to other teams. Whereas Boston, the depth is probably pretty bad, but at least their A bullpen might be good enough if they get a lead. And also their defense. Rafaela in center, I think, is going to start tomorrow. That's an upgrade. Yoshida getting out of the outfield is an upgrade for them. So their defense could be better this year.
Heard that.
Yeah, projected as a better offense. I mean, I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, but the defensive matchup, I just want to pull it up real quick. I think I have the Red Sox about even with the Mariners defensively. So that's, that might be surprising to people. I'm sure that doesn't bear out in the numbers last year. Slight edge for the Mariners, but yeah, it basically negates Boston's offensive advantage. So the matchup, essentially, the handicap comes down to the difference in the starting pitchers and a very negligible difference in the bullpens. And a couple weeks ago, I wouldn't have said it's a negligible difference, but as of right now, and for a one-game sample where everybody's rested, it is much closer to negligible than I would expect, with a bunch of guys working in the middle of the season.
All right. There's your Red Sox minute. Red Sox plus 140, plus 145 is what's out there right now in the market. Okay, as we always do, we close with final bets. I'll let Cirillo go first, then DeBundo, and then we'll wrap this sucker up. What do you got for opening day?
Yeah, let's just run down the rest of the slate quick. So the Giants minus 105 or better first 5 in game. I like them against Darvish. Darvish's slider command was really awful in that first start against the Dodgers, and the travel, aspects. I project value on the Giants here. I'd make them basically a minus 110 favorite. But if you're going to give them another 0.5%, 1% for travel, it makes them more than a justifiable edge. So Giants minus 105 or better first 5 in game. I also think Chapman and Ahmed on the left side of the infield for Webb is going to lead to some really good ratios for him. The Cincinnati Reds, who we just mentioned, going to have poor weather at Great American Ballpark for opening day. Knocks that total down closer to 9. So no value on the over-under. But Frankie Montas definitely worth watching, and I project him about a run better than Josiah Gray, and the gap may even be maybe even more substantial than that. Montas, again, not sure what to expect from him, but his final 2 spring starts were really good. 9 innings combined, 7 hits, 1 walk, 11 strikeouts, and most importantly, he threw 63 pitches, 58 of them were strikes. So seemed to have very good command in those final 2 starts, got roughed up earlier in spring, seemed to find his form later. Josiah Gray is a pitcher who across the board, I pull in a bunch of projections, and every projection has him with a FIP projection above 5 for this season. Some closer to 5.5. So projections very low on Gray. They have Montas about a run better than that, closer to 4.5, and I think he has more upside even relative to those numbers. So Reds first 5 in game, that first 5 line in particular, pretty big edge there. Probably like that up to minus 160. Dodgers first 5, pretty big gap between Glasnow and Miles Mikolas, about 1.2 runs on a season-long ERA. Dodgers first 5, I made closer to minus 270, so there is slight value there as well. The other unders I bet besides the Mets, bad weather in Philly. Anthony can elaborate on that more, but that game possibly moved to Friday. But Wheeler and Strider under 7.5, I like that under. Philly's also playing a more defensive lineup too. I saw Anthony log Rojas to win the National League Gold Glove yesterday in the Action Network app, but it just speaks to their more defensive alignment that they've been playing in the outfield with him and Marsh. It just leads to fewer runs because they finally are playing a decent defensive team in Philadelphia. Yankees and Astros under 8.5. Framber Valdez and Nestor Cortez Jr. looking at fantasy rankings, looking at projections. These are 2 of the most undervalued pitchers in baseball this season. So like both of these guys much more than the market. And it's tough to gauge, how I'm going to feel about pitchers relative to the betting market before I see odds. But I think fantasy ADP and seeing where I have guys ranked relative to where they're being drafted in fantasy leagues, I think that's a decent indicator for who I may overvalue or undervalue relative to even the betting market. So Cortez and Framber, to me, 2 guys who really stand out. Zach Eflin really stands out as starting pitchers who I think the public is still underrating, under 8.5 in Houston. And then lastly, the very obvious under is Cole Reagans and Pablo Lopez, my favorite pitching matchup of the day, maybe the best pitching matchup of the day. I'd probably rank that ahead of even Strider and Wheeler, but under 8 in Kansas City. I even saw some first 5 under 4s at plus money, minus 110. Those are great bets. I project the first 5 total closer to 3.5, and then you get to avoid the bullpen. So took under 8, probably looking for a first 5 under in Kansas City as well. And then lastly, just very quickly, the 2 overs that I lean to, Pittsburgh and Detroit, both over 7.5. Pittsburgh, Miami, the one of those 2 I may end up playing. We talked about the Tigers game, but not finding a reason not to play it, I made that total closer to 7.9 in Miami. And I can't find a reason why I shouldn't play it other than the fact that every time I bet a Marlins over, they strand like 100 runners on third base. So that's just more like a, that's getting over personal bias at, having to fire that bet. There's nothing in the math that says I shouldn't be doing it.
Something tells me that Marlins game will include something with runners in the running lane that could be annoying.
Possibly. Oh, for sure.
Based on what
Yeah.
you just
It'll end
Marlins feel like a very
6-1.
hijinks
Yep,
team
and
this
there will be
year.
an obstructed runner that didn't score. Yeah, of course.
I'm sorry.
Pirates opening day lineup, man. It's not bad.
It's not
It's
bad.
really not.
I'm just trying. It's
Lewinsky
opening
and
day.
Cruz and Hayes and like
I'm just.
Rowdy Tellez is not bad. There's no depth. If anybody gets hurt, like it's. I mean, there's nobody behind them. But the Pirates opening day lineup is Kutch too. Like it's intriguing to me.
Henry
Just
Davis,
trying to-
Yeah.
Just trying to build calluses, okay? On March
Yes.
27th, as we record the day before opening day. DeBundo, if you want to weigh in quickly on the Phillies and the weather situation, you have an angle on the Reds, and then we'll tease our opening day props episode for tomorrow.
Yeah, I got to give credit to Jim Turvey for the Rojas bet. He was he put it in the app, and we were texting about it. 18-1 at BetMGM last night. I think that's a crazy number. He was on a historic pace. The Phillies have decided they're going to start him opening day. The biggest thing for Rojas is, will he play enough? Will he hit enough to stay in the lineup every day? Because Pache's there. But, I mean, 18-1 is kind of crazy, given he was the best defensive outfielder in the sport last year for the first 3 months he played. So Rojas is a buy defensively. Don't really think he'll hit much, but if he hits 240, they're going to keep him in the lineup. So as far as the Phillies Braves go, I mean, it's exciting. Spencer Strider looked like the Terminator in spring. He threw 22 innings, which is more than any pitcher in baseball, 35 strikeouts, which is insane. He gave up 2 runs on the last inning, but it looked like he was going to pitch a shutout for spring training. He's got this new curveball. It's also fun because his last 2 starts were, of course, in the playoffs against the Phillies. And with this start on Thursday or Friday, it'll be 6. He pitched against the Phillies 6 times last year, including 4 of his last 6 outings of the season. So 5 of 7 against the Phillies because they played them in September and then in October. So there's a lot of familiarity between these 2 teams, these 2 pitchers. The Braves have seen Wheeler a ton. So that's interesting. But an interesting note is that there is rain in the forecast tomorrow. If it gets moved to Friday, 15 to 20 mile an hour winds projected blowing in at Citizens Bank Park. That total will not be 7.5. It shouldn't even be 7, really, with that wind. Because the only way you can really get to Strider, as the Phillies showed in the playoffs last year, is homers. And it's a lot harder to hit homers with 15 mile an hour winds blowing in. They hit 3 off him in the divisional round, game 4, and 1 off him in game 1. So other than that, they really didn't touch him. So we'll talk about that tomorrow on the prop show. We're going to dive in on some Phillies hitters I'm fading. But excited for that game. I think the number is about right. But I'll have a preview and some props up in the app and on the pod tomorrow.
You have anything you want to add on the Reds?
Yeah, I mean, Montas is tough to project, right? But, the spring stuff numbers look good. The spring results look good. The strikeouts look good to me. And we talked about Josiah Gray. He's going to be on the fade list. He was on the buy list last year, had a decent season, but the numbers didn't really stick if you looked under the hood. So, yeah, in agreement with Zerillo on the Reds. Tough news for the Reds that just broke as we were recording is that Matt McClain got surgery and is going to potentially miss the entire season. They hope to have him back this year. So now they lost Marte, they lost Friedel, and they lost McClain. And I think there's a lot of air that's been taken out of this Reds balloon. They're going to need Elly De La Cruz to actually hit this year. Otherwise, that lineup looks a lot less intimidating than it did 2 weeks ago.
All right, gents, good stuff. You can find Sean Zerillo and Anthony DeBundo in the Action Network app. They've added plenty. They will probably add more before tomorrow's slate gets underway. First game, again, scheduled for now, at 1:10 between the Milwaukee Brewers and the New York Mets at 1:10 in New York. Don't forget to download and follow these guys in the Action app. You can find Payoff Pitch, of course, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a 5-star rating and review. If you want to watch, you can also watch on the Action Network YouTube channel. Please subscribe there as well. And you can also check out the Action Network Discord to chop it up with some of the experts and fellow gamblers. They check in from time to time, at least our guys. So be on the lookout there. For Sean Zerillo, Anthony DeBundo, Brendan Glasheen, we are back tomorrow morning. DeBundo, Jim Turvey, they'll stop by for a special player props episode for opening day. Thanks for listening to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's MLB betting podcast. Best of luck, and we will join you again tomorrow. Thanks for listening.